Awesome. Here we are for another Mind the Autism podcast, and I have the unique pleasure of being here with Monique Lindner, and she is, oh gosh, I don't want to do a disservice by saying that she's this thing because she's so much more. Uh, but her bread and butter is supporting people to save time in their business. So in essence, she's uh, an entrepreneur, and she travels the world doing this as an autistic person. And as I said before, so much more. So if you could fill in the gaps and just kind of expand it for us and share a little bit more about your life, I'd love to hear it, and I'm sure everyone else would too.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stone. So, as you said, I travel for a long while already. I started traveling and really also living abroad when I was 19 years old. Um, Mostly because I always knew that my home country, or the country I was born in, that's how I call it now, Germany, is was never the country I felt like I belonged to or fitted in any type of ways. Whereas I was actually really doing well in masking my way through growing up. I only found out I'm autistic about 3.5 years ago. Actually, it's almost to the day 3 years that I claimed it, basically. I'm mostly self-diagnosed, but I have a sister who's autistic, so it's kind of like it makes sense. And the self-diagnosis also mostly because I'm in countries where getting a diagnosis is outrageously difficult, mostly because of how they see autism. And it's still one of those things that they think is a extraordinary dangerous sociopathic mental illness that you need to go into psych ward for or something like this. And they have an extremely outdated perception of autism, and it almost sounds like they're stuck in 1940 when it first was kind of like discovered. And then yeah, whoever wants to look into the history of how autism was being researched first, right?
Mm.
And
And just for context,
yeah,
where is your home base for right now?
I'm in Thailand right now,
Okay.
and I'm in Chiang Mai, and I have this dog who's hanging out just right there, who heard something that he needs to check out. And I adopted him here in Thailand, which is why we're based here right now. And that was a conscious decision to slow myself down because it got really overwhelming, especially also during the pandemic, to travel and to navigate all of these circumstances that have changed, but also the world that got so loud and so difficult to cope with as an autistic person, not knowing you're autistic by this time. And so, yeah, that's where I'm here right now. And what I do
Mm.
really is I'm a holistic high performance and leadership consultant and chief operational strategist, if you want to give it a name somehow. Um, those are the labels that come kind of closest to what I do, I think. And basically, I help 6 to 8 figure business owners, Fortune 500 leaders, all of these people, CEOs, not only to save time, but really to build teams and team cultures that are encouraging mindfulness. They celebrate the uniqueness of the people on their teams, and they bring the humanness back while also basically using technology to advance what we can do with it. Um, on the basis that there is a win-win-win for everyone involved and that there is sustainable growth without you know, uh, the modern day slavery that still happens around the world. So that
So
that really is the goal.
those sound, what you're doing, it sounds like a long-term engagement. because
Yes.
you would most likely have to build a relationship with them, really understand their business, and
Mhm.
understand who it is they're meant to serve. And sometimes they might not be serving the right segment. And so you'd have
Mm.
to dissect that and support them with the language that's going to connect more effectively with their customers. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I most work on the internal part. So I'm not necessarily doing their customer business strategies and their
Hmm.
language. So I don't do any branding, messaging, no customer segmentation. But I do
Okay.
the internal work of, you know, why are we doing what we're doing? What are our core values? How can we systematize and bring more structure that creates more freedom for our team and creates more space to create and
Mm,
work and design? And it has gotten to the point where most businesses across the world and most corporations also, they create teams based on skills and that's it. And that's obviously one way to do that, but it's not anymore working really well because you bring people together into a space, and mostly now it's remote, where they have to spend so much time together, so you can't anymore look at only what skills are they capable of doing, but you have to look at how do these people get along, how can we create a one mission that we can basically focus on and walk together, how do we also support these people in who they are and how they can grow and what they can connect with as their purpose basically in our company. And so this is really the deep work that I do. And it starts with the
okay.
leader as the fish starts to
And
rot at the head.
yes. So when you're working with an organization
Hmm.
and you first start speaking with them and they say, here are our values, this is our mission, this is our vision.
Hmm.
And when I've spoke with organizations and they say this is what it is, and I compare that with what's on their website,
Yeah.
most of the time, what they say on their website and what they've told me is completely different. And then if I
Yeah.
were to ask someone else, not a decision maker in the organization, how
Yeah.
does what are your they have no insight. They're not connected to that at all. And so,
Yeah.
uh, what is your process when you're working with people to make sure that there's alignment?
Yeah. That's a great question. Also, just for context, I have this massive mosquito chasing me right now, and as an autistic person it's freaking me out. So if you see slapping my or clapping my hands in front of my face, if you watch this podcast, I'm so sorry y'all, but this mosquito is really testing my autistic sensory capacity today. So
I really understand. I completely understand. I have the same thing.
it's also so big you can see it in the recording. It's crazy. um Also, mosquitoes, you have dengue, so I don't want that. But anyways, the thing is that when people come to me and they say like, oh, we have our mission and our vision and our core values, I say like, that's great. And let's redo it. Because most of the times what people learn to do is to fill in a formular. That's a word. So, they're like, oh, I help this, I do this, and I do this. But they basically just fill in gaps in order to put something on their website and then have it there. And it's not for the team, it's not for them, it's mostly for the customers in order to be like, oh, my goodness, they're doing this greatness in the world. And then do we see any of this? Doubtful. So what I do is I'm creating core values from who the people that founded this business are, because even though we like to, it's really difficult to disconnect or detach your work from your life. So the people who are basically the founders of this business, they're going to bring their own core values and their own vision for whatever is possible for this business into the business. And everything is based on that, right? So I restart the whole process, and I have a very long process of doing that. It takes like 2 to 3 weeks to only get to our core values if the person follows the steps in the time frame that I suggest. And then we basically, I'm very much for transparency, so we take these things into the team and we discuss it with the team if there's a team existing already, and we're basically making sure that the team understands how these values look like integrated in a day-to-day life, not on paper, not on a website, not on your company's wall or at home or printed out or whatever, but how does it look like if we live these values every single day?
Okay, so is that talking about possibility? So if they're able to cultivate a particular relationship within or deepen the relationship within their organization, then potentially they should be able to experience XYZ. Is that what you're suggesting?
So that would suggest some form of like cause and effect, and I guess there is some, but you would need to find the cause first. And so oftentimes it comes back to not having core values, but a lot of times it's also a form of the leadership not living these core values, the leadership not leading based on certain expectations or standards that have been set, and basically being out of alignment in many different ways. So they're saying they want, for example, to achieve they want to have a social impact. Social impact is really big for me and in my work, and I only take on clients who want to create social impact. And that means, for example, if you hire people from different countries across the world, you're not hiring them because they're cheaper or you can save money. You're hiring them for their particular skills, and you pay for the skill, not for the location they're from. And so
Okay, and
that
does that,
comes with.
sorry, let me just, does that also include cultural competence? So when people are engaging you, they also have a sense of wanting to expand their cultural competence
So
within their
that's my
organization.
job to help them with it as well. Yes, for sure. For
Okay.
sure. Because and I found that over the years working, and I worked in 9 different countries where I lived before, and mostly in management positions, and the biggest issue was always communication between people from different cultures, not because of what they said, but how it was perceived. And so the work ethics in countries are just very different. And when you say I need it by this time, for some people it means I bring it 3 days before. That's very German. For other people, it means I just bring it right on time, just on the last minute. And for some people, it's just a suggestion that maybe I can bring it by this time, but I could also bring it 2 weeks later. And then they're obviously getting in trouble in other countries that are not used to this type of work ethics or understanding of times, um, you know, timelines, deadlines, and all of these kind of things. And so this is a really big part of my work, to cross the bridges between cultures and the communication. And especially, honestly, because what I've seen a lot, especially in Western cultures, is that the Western leaders expect the people they hire to take on their culture, which is the wrong way
Mm,
around. And
right.
so I had, especially, and I'm sorry to call you out, dear Americans, but dear Americans, I had a lot of trouble trying to make
I, I'm
my.
actually I'm actually Australian.
I know that you are. That's why I'm not calling you out, but I'm saying for the people who listen on the podcast who may be Americans, I'm sorry to
Yes.
have to call you out, listeners. I know you're Australian. I know you're sitting across the pond, but it's difficult for many people from Western cultures to understand that there is a different version of whatever they have learned out there, especially if they haven't traveled. And so I did have clients from America, for example, or from the UK, who didn't understand, for example, which is very common in the Asian culture, what's called saving face mentality. And this is one of the most common things that people run into each other with from both ends, that is very difficult. And then the Western leaders just say, just get over it, or you can just unlearn it. And I'm like, no, but they're like 35 years old. How do you unlearn 35 years of conditioning in like 5 minutes? If I was going to tell you the same thing about your, and I'm going to just make this example, please don't take this as if every American was like this, but the surface level, everything is awesome and amazing. And oh my goodness, you're my best friend right now after meeting me 5 minutes, because this is how many Americans can be perceived as sometimes. Then we have a problem, because suddenly your feedback is, oh my God, this was amazing, but you hated it. But they think they've done everything right. Whereas they would never ask a question to you, because that is perceived in their culture as weak and as if they were unknowledgeable. And so here we are, two people stuck in their own cultures, and they're talking across, and like basically they're misunderstanding each other with every word they say. So yes, that's a big
Mm,
part of my work.
yes, I'm feeling this is huge. And as you're speaking, I'm seeing several thousand plates spinning at the same time. What is the so when people reach out to you to
Uh-huh.
help them with the mess that they've created, what tends to be the the most what is the problem that the most consistent problem where people when they meet you they say, okay, yes, we need to engage you because we have this thing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because you know how they say in marketing, give them what they want and sell them what they need. And it usually is that. And it doesn't get into my autistic mind. I don't understand how this is such a big gap. But apparently it is. And so people usually come to me and they're like, I'm running out of time. I can't spend any time with my family. I'm stuck at this glass ceiling. So basically, I work, but I don't make more money. My team doesn't understand what I want from them, or they're doing things wrong. Or, like I had to let go of these people because they were the wrong people. And I'm like, well, it sounds all like a you problem, to be honest, because
Mm.
there's a
so
solution to it, right?
so are they coming to you because they're at a bifurcation because they're so time poor and stressed
Hmm.
and they want to go forward but it seems impossible because they've tried everything, and then when they
Yeah.
engage you you bring in the secret sauce.
Yeah. And it's like, it's like this catch 22. If only I had more time, I could make more money, and then I could hire more people to take away what I have, but I don't have the time, so I don't have the money, so I can't hire people. And so they're stuck in this hamster wheel, basically. Hmm.
Right, got it. And this um I'm also hearing that you have some pattern recognition.
Oh, that is the secret sauce, I would say. That is not only that, I think also because of my very clear, I don't want to say concise because I talk a lot, but my very clear to the point communication is what gets the people out of their cultural stuckness in communication. So
Mm,
this and the pattern recognition, I think the pattern recognition is so high that at points you can call me psychic, because I can see patterns years ahead of times.
mm,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, I definitely identify with that.
Mm.
Now as this may be a difficult question. I'm curious if being autistic, now that you've had a few years in, and you really, I can hear that you've also studied it. Um, do you feel that being autistic supports you with being culturally sensitive and being able to teach that to others? And maybe if you could talk a little bit about that.
That is very interesting. So I believe that growing up in Germany has helped me a lot to understand the game. What I mean is, like, when someone is passive aggressive, oh, I hear, like, you don't have to tell me. I hear that I can read it when someone is passive aggressive. Like, I think Germany and the UK, countries like that, they're the masters of passive aggressiveness, especially in the workforce. And
Mhm.
so I've been trained very heavily on that. And other very manipulating, gaslighting, bullying behavior, not that I've done, but I was on the receiving end for years, like decades, basically. And so I think now I'm very good at picking this up. What I found though is that I'm better at teaching
Mhm.
than recognizing it in the moment sometimes. What I mean
Mm.
is at work and in business, I I'm pretty well in seeing all the things, and I think that sometimes stands in my way because I don't want to play these games. And so
Mhm.
I think it stands in my way because I refuse to take part in these systems. Whereas in all of like social behavior, friendships, and whatever, I go into the room and the only way I can feel my way through is like energetically. How does someone energetically feel? But if my friend is currently like angry at me or like is sad or whatever, I don't pick up on all of these emotions and feelings and facial recognition, whatever. And I
Right.
often, and I often uh, fall into these traps of social rules. I don't
Right.
understand them. I also don't want to understand them anymore. And they're way too complicated and between the lines, and people make shit up. And sorry, they make things up in between. And so it's just a matter of um, how much do I really want to also be able to do that. And in my personal life, I feel like I'm over it, to be honest, to have to
Mm.
try and figure out all of this social behavior and rules and these and that. I'm like, sheesh, just say what you gotta say.
Can you give maybe an example of where you may have helped a client who didn't have any cultural sensitivity to expand their cultural competence?
Hmm. I think I bring a lot of perspective into the spaces I work with. And that comes from having traveled to over 45 countries, having lived half of my life now outside of Germany, and having worked with so many different people from around the world, different cultures, ethnic minorities, different backgrounds and beliefs and faith and all of the things. And I think one of the things is that I see often is that people, when there is an issue or when something isn't done the way they think it's being done, they immediately create a story about what this means about the person versus trying to ask questions.
Mm.
So,
So
it's,
you teach your clients to ask questions and to be curious.
yeah. And also
Okay.
to just imagine how many other stories are being possible in this scenario, and to trust that people are not necessarily trying to do them harm, although that is difficult sometimes
Mm.
to trust in if you had different experiences, and I get that. But the asking questions and asking the right questions, not asking the passive aggressive, so why were you so late, like, like
Yeah.
but to ask,
You know,
like,
so,
hey, was there anything that happened that made you not send in the assignment on time? Or, like, is there anything you need support with? Did you not want to ask me any questions? Like, is that
yeah.
something that you don't do in your culture? Like, trying to not like think in their way, but think outside the box more as well.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you share, because of your experience and obviously because of your interest in people, is that you intuitively have expanded your own cultural competence.
Hmm.
And is there, do you have any practices or rituals that you employ specifically to continue to expand your cultural competence?
Um, when I travel, I do my very best to get myself out of the comfort zone as much as possible. So I know that's not for everyone, but I have traveled solo for 18 years. So I'm single most of the time, anyways. So I travel by myself in most of the countries. And what I try to do is I try to go to local restaurants as much as I can. And I try to observe what people do and how they do things and how they interact. Because what I deem to be impolite in my country, maybe while people eat, is super normal, and it's deemed impolite to not to do it in other countries, right? To, like, for example, smacking with your mouth really loud, or making sounds while you eat, and like all of these things. Like, try this in Germany. You're being
Mm,
at least looked down upon really badly, if
yeah.
not even being told to not do that. But in other countries, if you don't do that, that's a sign that you don't like the food, and you may be even being released from the restaurant or sent out.
Mm,
And so, really learning this, and then, like, obviously making not only observations, but my own understanding of it, and then choosing, do I want to repeat this? It doesn't mean if I don't like it that it's bad. So I don't try to judge or put any label on it. I just say, like, it's not for me, but that's how it
right.
is.
So
And
your process is to immerse yourself in the culture wherever you go.
yeah. And one thing I think I would love to share is, like, also something that may not be for everyone, but I have stopped watching any, and I mean it, any TV series, Netflix, anything you can look and watch over 11 years ago. And the reason is because at that point I already felt it's wasting my time, but also it's very brainwashing in one or the other way. You can take it as you want. So I stopped, and I never kind of believed that what they showed on TV about other people in other countries seemed to be true. It seemed to be so staged and fake to me. So at this time, I was like, I'm just gonna, like, also because I have been traveling already by this time. And I knew that the things I saw on TV and the things I saw in real life in other countries were not very much aligned. And so
Mm,
I made the conscious decision to, if I want to know something, I will ask the people who live this experience. So I'm going to go to the indigenous people and ask them about their experiences, and to the ethnic minorities, and to the people with disabilities, and the people with neurodiversities, and whatever it is you want to know, you go and ask them. You're not going
mm,
to ask a scientist who once visited them for 2 days. You go and ask the people.
right.
Mm-hmm.
We're almost out of time, and there's one more burning question
Go
that
ahead.
we have to address. A lot of neurodiverse people would look at your life,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't, their only insight is the conversation that we're having right now. They don't know the ups and downs and all the challenges that you've had.
Yeah.
So one might have a perception that you are living the dream.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, they may think, well, I'm not Monique. How do I do that? How can I step in that direction? And what would be your, I guess, let's stay away from tactics and let's look at who have you been? What is
Yeah.
the beingness? What are some of the stories, internal stories that you have told yourself or created for yourself that have enabled you to live this life of freedom for
Mm-hmm.
yourself?
Yeah. So I think I want to start with, interestingly enough, it wasn't only for neurodiverse people, but also neurotypical people. And, like, a lot of people in my environment who said, oh my goodness, how can you leave everything behind and then create this life? And then I had a lot of people unfriend me, even on Facebook, literally unfriend me. People I've spent half of my life with, who said, like, oh, you're just on holiday all the time, and you're like you're not even living a real life, you're not working. And I was like, Well, if that is annoying you or frustrating you, please find your way out, because it's not something I'm going to change anytime soon. It's also not reality. You're only seeing the Facebook highlight reel, basically, right? So, uh, a very quick background. I don't know how long we have left. I think maybe like 2-3 minutes, but this
Yeah,
is
we're
a this
we're
is a
we're we're going over, but this is really
okay.
important.
This is a full background story, but the reason why I chose this life and how I created is was I become really, really, and I mean sick, really sick and tired with who I was and what I've created from my own life, to the point where I actually died of a cardiac arrest. And I'm not saying I killed myself with this cardiac arrest, but I definitely, the way I lived added on to me having this cardiac arrest. And I was clinically dead for 25 seconds. Now, if I tell you how old I was, you'll be shocked, because I was only 19 years old. And this was really the start, because when I woke up and I got back to life, actually, I thought, like, what in the actual life is happening
We
here?
got it. Yeah.
What's actually happening here? Because how can I do all of the things I'm supposed to be doing, and all of the things that people tell me to do that I rebel against, because I was a rebel and I was like, I'm not going to do that. And still am so miserable, to the point that my body gives in and my soul leaves me behind. So I had to take a really honest look. And I'm at the point, again, to be honest, I have to take a really honest look at my life and be really honest. And I think that's the point where most people actually step out, because to be really honest with yourself is not like being honest with the most obvious things. Is being honest about the things that are the most painful. And that, at that time, I had to admit that even though I tried really hard to not please my family and to not please anyone around me, I've done it even though I've done the opposite, because I lived my life for everyone else around me, not for myself. I didn't even know what I wanted, basically, right? And so I have to do this over and over again. It's an evolution, and it's something you kind of have to remember, because once you get a little bit comfortable, it's easy to fall back into it, and it's easy to fall back into societal pressure. And although it was always clear to me that there are things in my life that I don't want, and that I'm not going to live life how everyone else is going to live it, it's still easy to obey to these societal rules that are so precious on us, right? They are so
Mhm.
heavy, and we feel like if we don't do it, we're going to be pushed out of society and we're going to have to live alone. And I'm at the point where I'd rather live alone, to be honest. And it's also fine. It's not, and first of all, it's not going to happen. But second of all, it's just a matter of accepting the things that you truly want for yourself as being okay, and not
Okay.
having to obey to societal uh, expectations, and then taking small steps. I think for me it was starting to travel first, even though I had a full-time job, and taking every single holiday and every long weekend I had, and I would travel. And if traveling is not for you, you don't have to travel just because I travel, right? If for you it means to going to cosplay conferences, or to go to spelling bees. What's the thing? Spelling bee. You know what I mean, like the
Mm.
competitions, or do whatever the hell you want. But like for me, it was adventure sports and travel. I'm out of
Mm.
the adventure sports a little bit now because of my health, but the travel is still on there. And then I increased the volume, and the moment that I was so sick and tired for like the third time of my life in Germany, I said, like, I'm gonna push the reset button, and then you just have to go for it. And don't ask
Mm.
anyone for permission, because no one will give it to you. Usually, the
So,
closest people around you are the ones who push their biggest fear onto you.
right. So let me see if I can distill without taking away from energetically what you shared, but I'd like to summarize it just so that we all understand. So you have an uncompromising stand and integrity when it comes to your values.
Hmm.
And you have decided what your values are,
Yeah.
and you are fully self expressed in the way that you articulate them and in the way that you live them. And because you refuse to compromise on your values, that resulted in the actions that you took. And
Hmm.
so if you were maybe sharing with a client or someone else is like, wow, I really love what you're doing, Monique. What's the playbook? Then your advice might be, um, do you.
Yeah. And I love that you bring it back to the core values because really everything in my life is kind of about core values. And one of the things is you have to accept the consequences that comes with your actions. I think a lot of people they don't want that. They don't like I've probably lost and I put this in quotation marks, lost more people in my life than I have met solely because of the actions I take. And I keep doing this. I keep meeting new people who want to be friends and then change their minds fairly quickly the more they get to know me. And I'm okay with that now because, look, if you are not
I'm
coming into
sorry.
life,
That's a
it's
very
fine.
autistic thing.
Yes,
That's-
it is indeed. It's indeed, but it's also I believe, and I have been told many times, that people get intimidated by me. It's not an action I take towards them, but they get intimidated by me because of how clear I am about my values. And I'm not afraid to speak up if they basically cross boundaries that cross these values. So if you're crossing me, that's it. Like, I'm going to tell you. And if you're not fine with me pointing that out, well, then you have a problem. It's not mine. And so that's it.
that
It's
that's
yeah.
so fantastic, and I really have a very clear idea about why organizations love working with you
Thank you.
because your integrity is it's it's very high,
Yeah.
and that's you can't buy that. Either someone has it or they don't. And people
Hmm.
who have it, they are constantly working on making sure that they're increasing their level of integrity. So that's a really, really beautiful thing. I'm so appreciative of this time. And we really must do this again because we have
Yeah.
we've we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much there.
And I
And
had these thoughts I wanted to share with you, and we couldn't even get to that.
yes. So part two, we're gonna open up one of these things and we're gonna let it rip.
Dive right in. Yes.
Monique, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to our next chat, and uh, we will be speaking again very soon.
Thank
This
you,
is
Stone.
Mind the Autism podcast. Bye bye.